morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everybody.
Hey.
One word responses.
One word answers.
Good
This
morning.
is incredibly good for a podcast.
Good.
So, what do you think
Morning.
about all these new developments in Power BI? Great.
Good.
Great.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Tony the Tiger.
They're great. Yeah. What updates are you talking about?
Yeah, where has he been? Did they just not use Tony the Tiger anymore? That was like a thing back when I was growing up. He was everywhere.
He was everywhere.
Let's talk about. Okay, this is almost comical to some degree. There is if you go to the blog.fabric.microsoft.com, and again, also, I can't stand the new why can't it just be blog.fabric.com? Like, come on, Microsoft, get this together. This is an absurd URL I can never remember it. Anyways, on August 9th, we get the Microsoft Fabric July update. There must have been some issues. So there must have been something delaying the blog here a bit. But we get this massive dump of a blog. And you're talking about just, usually Microsoft does the blogs. There's like, hey, there's a couple sections at the top. You scroll through the sections and there's a couple links in the article below. Holy smokes. There's like 3 pages or 2 full scroll pages of just features all in just the link section of stuff going on. There is so many things that have been released inside this blog. It's crazy.
And significant features. Like
I couldn't even tell you at this point. Like I'm having a hard time trying to figure out like which portions of this are actually like. I'm just trying to get my head around like, okay, what do I even look at? I have to read this whole thing. I don't even know what's important here.
Are you guys aware? Like, are we supposed to start consuming Power BI updates on the Fabric blog and not on the Microsoft Power BI blog? Because there's been no updates on the Power BI blog, but there are Power BI updates in the Fabric blog.
Yes, exactly. All right, so there is a whole section for it's reporting. I don't know. It's confusing. I don't know if it's Fabric or if it's Power BI anymore. The line is getting more and more blurred as we go.
Same color.
I'm pretty sure you do know like the direction there.
Well, I mean the direction is more Fabric, right? But it just seems confusing to me. It's literally the same name for the same tool.
Yep.
And it's the same color.
Yep.
Look at the color.
So, anybody able to pick up anything cool out of the Monster blog yet?
Taking the liberty of reading it, yes. I want to break out one of the first thing on the article is actually maybe the most significant for all these new users, including literally everyone. It's the help pane, but it's the awareness help. You've seen a lot of tools do this. You're on a certain part of the website or a tool, and you're like, what do I do here? And you have to try to search for it. Well, now, and I had no idea this was even possible. If I'm like in notebooks or if I'm in pipelines and I want to get help there, all I have to do is click on the question mark and it'll actually give me help for that area. So I can actually kind of understand about each of the like awareness of where I'm actually located in Fabric. That's significant. And I think for a lot of new users. And I can also search in there too, so I can stay in the same experience. And I think for a lot of us going, where do I get started? That's a great first step. I'm not sure. Again, it's. Are you not jazzed about that?
No. Yeah.
Why?
I mean, help. I mean, we have all these updates, and you go after help.
I'm not saying I said it.
Hey, it's an ease of use feature.
I get it. I just can't just wrap my head around all this stuff that's going on here. The one I think you'll like, Seth.
I'm trying to ease you in this, man.
True. Oh. I think the one you'll like here, Seth, is there's this One Lake file explorer. So there's like this is the program, I assume, right? This is the downloadable One Lake app, right? It says it supports switching for organizational accounts. So now you can have multiple organizations inside the One Lake file explorer, and you can then jump between different organizations and explore files in different orgs.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I think that might be something useful.
What a profound statement. They just released a bunch of new features. This one might be useful.
It works
switching
incredibly.
organization. Okay, I got to dig into this one because
that one you might, because you have two tenants that you deal with quite often, and you got to. Now I don't really know what that means. That just means if I'm just exploring files, I can then easily switch.
Basically, like OneDrive.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. So I think this makes more sense now because then I could have. I mean, the whole idea of OneDrive is this. It's this easy to use thing
from users who work with multiple AAD tenants. That's me.
Yeah. And it said in the beginning, one of the most requested features.
But I don't want to switch tenants. Why can't it be like OneDrive? If you want to talk about something that's like not great yet, why can't it be like OneDrive and I can add accounts to it? I have to sign out and then sign in.
Here's the biggest feature of all of this, though. The biggest feature of all this: Data Factory, Data Flows Gen 2. You can now rename a data flow inside the query editor. That was a big miss when they first came out with that one.
And then you have like, oh shoot, what's data flow 7?
Yeah, exactly. What is data flow 7? That was Tommy and I when we were trying to build data flows. Like the silly thing was just there the whole time. And like, what the heck is happening?
We were asking each other like, are you data flow?
Are you sure?
4,
are you sure we can't? Are you sure we can't rename this thing? This is crazy.
Oh yeah, we had like 5. Like I think you're 4. Okay, you do 4. Another big one: sharing SQL warehouses or data warehouses is another thing that you can actually share it. And so you can basically have a warehouse that doesn't ever go into the whole story of a report. And I can share this with users that they can connect in their own systems, which is kind of crazy that now within Fabric, I can create a whole SQL database with views and the whole shebang. And I can share that just like you could share a normal SQL database.
And this is the thing I think is interesting here is you're getting. I really think the whole interesting part around what SQL inside Fabric. Now, one thing I haven't seen very clearly yet or don't understand yet is, can I bring a dedicated SQL server to Fabric? I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure if I've done that specifically. Right now, my understanding is everything in Fabric is like a serverless type experience, right? So you get by default a serverless SQL server, and then when you go do your talking to Tommy, like the SQL server is basically just managing or connecting to Delta tables under the hood, right? So you're getting views. Views are something that live on top of the Delta tables. Like, to me, this is a very big change in direction where Databricks has been doing this for a while, but now Microsoft is just making SQL do the same thing. This is really impactful, I think. I think this is really an interesting move of what's occurring here, because it feels like they're adopting a better standard, or they've really changed some line of thinking that it's different than how I'm used to thinking about SQL servers.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it can't go understated. In Fabric, anyone can create their own SQL database, basically, which is insane. Like, doesn't take long. You don't have to spin up anything in Azure. You still have to pay, but it's incredible how easy that is.
And these are all things that are Fabric related. We haven't even gotten to the Power BI things.
Well, there's not much there.
I think smooth lines in the line chart is something that people have been requesting for a while. So the line type is now smooth inside. Again, sometimes people argue a smooth line inside a line chart could be somewhat deceiving. But if you're generally showing trends of things, I think it looks a lot better than just a hard edge line.
Yeah.
And now they've got leader lines. So if you do have a smooth chart and you want to put leaders on top of the notes, like where the data point comes from, you now get leader lines attached. That's another big win as well. The pane switcher for the different options for bookmark selection, performance, and all those, it's getting better to work with it, because when it came out initially, you'd click something and stuff would just start disappearing. It's way better than what it is than it had been in the past. However, I do feel like they have gone back and had a regression on something inside the visuals. If you build a Power BI report right now, you can't adjust a visual without having data attached to it. If you put let me say it this way, when you build a visual on a report page and you add the visual to the report page, unless you add any pieces of data to the data fields, there are no properties of the visual. You can't see them. They're gone. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we had this issue before. And previously, they would at least give us the options to see like the settings of the visual, because you should be able to drop a visual down and you should be able to say, where's the XY position? What's the width and the height of it? You should be able to type those things in and make it easier. They're just behind. Like it used to do this, I feel like, and I feel like now it's not doing it.
That
Anyways.
one I would sell. I don't need to buy that issue. Not a huge. I can see that, but
I don't need to
just
buy
make it. I don't need. I would rather, if I'm going to invest in anything, it's going to be the on object. Make that experience better. If that's a feature that they lose out on or they miss out,
I don't even care anymore. Like right now, I don't even care how they do the on object feature. I just turn it off.
So do I.
And now I just have no, seriously. Like you can get the on object experience. I don't use it at all. All I do is click open the format pane on the right hand side and just use that. I mean, it felt like it was scary to some degree when they were doing this whole on object thing, because it felt like they were going to turn on the on object and then turn off the filter pane or the settings pane. But they haven't done that. The settings pane still exists. There's still a lot of other settings on the visual that they're not going to expose in the on object editing. So it's very easy now. And so now all the things that have changed for me was when I want to make a visual, I right click on the canvas, select new visual, and then go right to the format pane and then use that the whole time. I don't even touch it. They're going to see that's the only feature of that as people are going to use.
Before we divert, because I feel like we could spend an hour therapy session on object. I got another one that's also equally significant to things that we've been doing. Data flows Gen 2, some major updates. Hey, if I actually have something that needs to be cleaned up before I add it to another destination, Power BI will do it for me now, or Microsoft Fabric will do it for me. So let's say, in order for something to get pushed to a destination, you need to have column names, no spaces.
Yes,
and
correct.
certain data types. Before, you would get there, which didn't take a long time, but a lot of clicks, and then it would go, oh, I'm sorry, you have to change some stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to get out of the experience. Well, now it'll actually auto recognize, like, oh, you have spaces. We'll clean it up or replace values for you, and it'll do that automatically. Gosh,
for new users of using Power Query, I think that's one of the getting too many steps in the steps pane is sometimes it bugs me when I see new users doing this. They'll rename something and then they'll move a column, and then they'll rename something and then they'll do a transformation. Then they'll do another we have like the same step like 10 times. I really like when I'm working with Power Query is the last two things I do are check the names and then check the data types. Like those are the last two things you want to do before you load. And particularly now that the naming schema is very picky inside Delta. Like in Delta tables, you can't have a space in the name. You just can't. However, I also feel like Microsoft should be smart enough to figure out how to like put a symbol or something in there that changes the name of the column so that the UI can have a space, but the Delta table doesn't allow the spaces. Like I feel like there should be something there that's like it should just auto do it. You know what I mean?
So this problem literally led me to one of those rabbit holes where I learned something new, because rather than just manually replacing this, I knew this would come up again. Actually, now it won't. So great. But now, but I'm sure there's other uses that basically finding a way to dynamically replace values in all the columns.
Yeah, correct.
Now I know how to do that, but now it doesn't matter because they just fixed it. So thanks, Microsoft.
How do you do that? How do you dynamically replace all names and columns?
It's a list. You basically, there's one called column names. You reference another query. You make it a list. The names of the columns a list, and then you just go back and refer to it. So
nice. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Other updates, Analytics Gen 4 or version 4 can now be pushed to your SQL databases. And for people who have been in marketing, and
analytics, you missed a word. Google Analytics Gen 4, right? I think you're like Analytics Gen 4. I'm like, what is this new thing you were talking about? You know, I agree with you. Yes, I was just looking at that one too. GA4 or Google Analytics version 4 had come out. I don't know. It's been out for a while. Well, Google is literally forcing you and saying, hey, you can't use GA anymore without upgrading to this new thing now. So it's now getting forced down our throats. So like, all right, we're going to have to figure out how to work with GA4 now. So let's try to learn how to use it. Now the connector's updated, which is great because it's a pain to work with GA4. I'm hearing companies now leaving like Google Analytics and going to like Adobe Analytics or other companies because it's so bad.
The data on the back end, like the way they did it, it's terrible.
I don't even, I don't.
Did they remove a lot of the detail?
Well, no, they have the details, but the way it shows now, I forgot how it's called, but it's not a tabular way of looking at it.
I still haven't wrapped my head around it.
It's insane.
Like going between the reporting of one to the other is just.
Look at the back end.
I haven't been able to.
It's nested. Everything's nested. So there's no like individual tables. It's yeah. Oh yeah.
Not cool.
Another one I think I'll be personally diving into. There's actually now implementing a Lakehouse in Microsoft Fabric certified course.
Yes, I did see that, which is good that they came out with that. So I think that'll be a good class for people to kind of study up on. Tommy, you have to go through the class and see how close you were with all of our tutorials on fabric.com. 90% of what you need to know is already on the web of the YouTube channel. So
it's kind of cool because now I can teach it. So
now you can teach it. Like I actually have an online course that is actually part of YouTube, and I actually took the real one, and I really know what I'm talking about now.
So I'll be diving into those study materials and looking.
You don't need to study it. You already know everything. Just take the test.
I'll see what they got in there.
That's what Seth and I did when we took the Power BI one. We were like, I think we know what we're doing. Let's just take the test. And then we both passed. We're like, whoa, it looks like we knew what we're doing. All right, let's jump on. This blog is amazing. There's a lot of other probably good nuggets here, but I think we've hit the main topics on the Fabric blog.
Like one last comment though that I want to get your guys is
not done.
Hot take on. Is it too much? You know what I'm saying? Like how?
Yes.
Like my God. Like one, I'm kind of disappointed because I kept looking at the Power BI blog for an update, and I guess I have to come here now, which is fine. I'll just save it. But I like it's almost information overload. Like if you actually think everybody's going to read through all of these things, I mean, with the exception of us, maybe that's just reinforces a full podcast then at least once a month when it drops, and maybe we should do that. I don't know. I'm just scrolling and scrolling.
Let me give you a hot take. Yeah, let me give you a hot take with another hot take. If Microsoft is expecting people to really invest all their money into this and transfer where they're at and where they need to be, they better have updates like this every month for the next few months. There's a lot of things that need to be improved to make this an enterprise organization ready.
Well, I mean, that's why.
Well, I'm going to take a hot take on your hot take on your hot take.
Preview at the end, Tommy, because it's not GA.
Well, if it's going to be, that's what I'm saying.
I know.
I think
your hot take, Mike?
Yeah, I'll take the super hot take of your hot takes.
I'm fire.
I don't even know what that means anymore. I'm literally confused about that whole phrase now. But anyways, I feel like what Fabric was doing was whipping stuff out the door in order to hit build. I feel like it was like, this is all the stuff they wanted to build. And it was like close.
What?
Right? Shocker.
But
this is a lot of like the catch up, the cleanup, everyone can take a breather. We've announced it. We've been holding on to this noise for so long. Like these are all the things they wanted to go day one release with. But a lot of this, not a lot of this. I see a good portion of this is like a lot of polishing things, like renaming a data flow when you create the data flow. Yes, 100% that should be there. But they had to cut something somewhere to get things out the door, make sure like it would run, right? If it wouldn't run, we couldn't release it. So I think you're right, Tommy. I think they're getting a lot of feedback. I do also think Microsoft is heavily invested in getting this to work and work well, because if you think about all the $5,000 versions of this thing that they're just giving away for free, every user is getting their own P60 or F64. Like they're literally saying, if you had an organization of 100 people and everyone tried this and started building things in Fabric, every single person is getting a $5,000. That's a big investment. That's like a $500,000 investment for them from a paper. Again, it's probably like funny money anyways, because Microsoft can run it much cheaper. But whatever, like that's a lot of investment at Microsoft's level just to have a couple hundred people have an F64. So I mean, they're really motivated to say that this is the way they want to do things. And there are some things that I feel like are really impactful. Direct Lake, I think, is going to be amazing. And Tommy, you were just talking before we got on the podcast around how Direct Lake can be used through an XMLA endpoint and how fast it is and how cool. Yeah, this is incredible. So I think there's some really big movers here. I still feel like the data engineer experience coming into Fabric is still subpar to the other tools that they have, thinking more around Azure Data Factory and Synapse. But I definitely think they're very quickly closing the gap on those things. And it will soon be on par with all the other data engineering tools that we get inside Azure. So I'm very excited to see this investment going. I hope this really takes off, honestly. I really hope this solves a lot of people's problems and makes it super easy to use this stuff, because I want to see them continue developing this, because I think a year from now, we're going to be talking totally different around what Fabric's doing. It's going to be very pivotal to a lot of what we build in the future if they keep investing at this level. I don't know if that was a hot take or anything, but I just need to take it.
Good, Mike.
Yep. It's a good synopsis. What
Okay.
are we talking about today?
All right. The main topic of today, after we've gotten 20 minutes deep. So today, the phrase, have you ever heard the phrase, the art of the possible? Have you ever been on that call with someone and they're like, oh, we need to build some Power BI reports. We need to build something in Fabric. Yeah, but we need to see the art of the possible. Have you guys ever heard that phrase said to you?
I think maybe once, and it kind of raised some alarm bells. Depends on who's saying it, man. It really does. Well, please embellish.
Well, I'm
assuming you've heard it before.
Well, I've heard it multiple times before, and it's the idea. It sounds like I hear the phrase being used, particularly around Power BI, when someone shows up to Power BI, and you start talking about it, and they're like, "Well, I don't really know what I can do with it. I need to know, like, what are all the practical use cases? How would I leverage this? How can this add business value for me long term?" And I can't tell you the number of times, Seth, when we were consulting together, I remember there were companies that were asking me that thing. Hey, can you help me see the art of the possible? I need to understand, what is this thing really capable of? So basically saying, I need you to stop at what you're doing, build this really pretty and elaborate, super incredible report. Wow me, right? Show me like the wow factor of that tool, and then I can buy into it. And so, I don't know, I've heard this phrase all the time. And I think this is I think it misses some of the main functionality improvements of, in general, Power BI and automating things. Like just automating your data loads, majorly helpful, not super art of the possible, right? I'm not going to build you a bunch of bookmarks. I think we get stuck on some of this where, Power BI is adding a lot of capability to the team, and we get stuck on, or people get stuck on the prettiness, the report side. It's all about the reports, and we lose some of this other like really solid mechanical pieces of, well, now I'm automating data. Now I have this one data set that I'm reusing over and over again. We need to invest a lot more time in this one master data set because it's going to make things a lot simpler across the organization. Hey, by the way, we can build paginated reports online now. You want access to data? Great. Here you go, team. Build what you want to build. You don't need to ask me questions. I'll teach you how to use the data model. Let's go. So like, I feel like there's some other low-hanging fruits there. It's like, yeah, it's not pretty and sexy looking, but it's like really useful. I don't know. That's where I was going with the main topic today. How is Power BI the art of the possible? What can it do for your organization? What are your benefits you would expect it to do? And what is that scope of how I would expect it to change my org? Tommy, what do you think? Have you heard it before?
Yeah, I've heard it. Honestly, took that a different way. A lot of people, I think, put BI in a box more than they think that, oh, tell me everything you can do. BI.
Nobody puts BI in a box.
Nobody puts BI in the box. Well, if you were to pull like like a random person from 1,000 organizations says, what does BI do? I think the majority, overwhelming, would say they build reports. And that would kind of be the expectation. Right?
Yes. And that's the art of the possible piece of this, right? That's, to me, that's the art side, right? They're like, show me what I can do.
Right. But I think that's the only thing they think BI does, or that's kind of the output. And I think a lot of, we have a lot of other talents, and I think there's a lot of other things part of that that's more than a reports that where we bring value to the business. Mm-hmm. But no one would see us there, or in a sense expect that, oh, this is a strength, this is a talent, or this is a leadership role that we may have at the organization here. So huge one for me, just thinking about this is like, how does a team, if you're a BI team and you're starting Power BI, or people just have you in this box already, the expectations, you just build reports, but there's other things that you can do and you can do well, like helping data migrations, helping people structure how all those Excel sheets and put them into databases. Well, how can first, what are those other talents you can say? And then I guess the other thing I would ask is, what can we do about kind of raising that awareness?
So let's maybe address your first question. What are the if I kind of said here, what are the expected benefits of Power BI above just report building, right? What other value adds are getting there? Seth, looks like you want to say something.
No, I mean, business intelligence in general is what we're talking about. Like it spans outside of just Power BI, right? So, but very applicable in that realm as well, because it's a tool that actually solves across the spectrum of, I think, where Tommy's driving at as far as like the talents of a business intelligence team and what the talents should be, because those are wide ranging, right? So to just answer your question, Tommy, I think directly, the talents would be, right, we should or would have folks that have the ability to collect data from source systems, cleanse it, store it, like have an understanding of storage mechanisms. Where do we put storage? Like, where do we put data? Enterprise, like, can you enterprise it? Where and how do you do that? Have the ability to analyze data and make meaning out of it. And then there's a reporting aspect to it, right? Like, it's the ecosystem realistically of all data within an organization. And I think the awareness levels part, at least on a higher level, would require the business intelligence team to look at data within the organization in a holistic perspective, right? I think some teams get relegated and put into the box because they don't know how to expand outside the box, or they're just sufficient with like being happy generating data, like reporting off of the same data sets, that maybe they don't need to do a lot of the collection and storage because it's a very robust system that's been around for a very long time, right? Like, because how many organizations are actively adding new data sources or inputs into the business all the time? It's not.
That's a really good point.
Like, I would argue the vast majority of organizations have had back-end data systems and or warehouses and or a lot of work done in the past where maybe you don't need to do a lot of the ad hoc or new integration with new systems, etc. I don't know.
I want to go. Wait, don't move on to that point. Tommy, we're gonna refer? Yeah, keep going on that one, because I don't want to leave that point there. I want to come back to it because I have some really interesting thoughts around that. The back end data systems of organizations and how Power BI is changing that, but the number of sources maybe not as changing as fast as we think it is. Sorry, go ahead, Tommy.
No, I was going to disagree. I think there's an ecosystem of organizations of unstructured data sources as an Excel files that people still use and rely on to transfer that go across companies. That should be something that could be more seamless and a better process in a database or something in the cloud. But they exist in smart sheets and they exist in Airtable. They exist in all these other things that companies are going to constantly referring to. That could be automated better, but they may not be, and again, source systems, but they are relied on marketing teams and sales teams and operations still to this day.
Are you arguing with a question?
I'm just saying I would disagree. I would say there's a lot more than just the
What are you disagreeing with? I asked a question.
You asked the question. No, you asked the question.
Do you think business intelligence teams that just find themselves in a box are ones where businesses are only just they rely on their source systems and they're the reporting team, as opposed to an organization that has a lot of new sources to include? It's an open question. So you're saying, there are actually a lot of interrelated or ad hoc data sources throughout an ecosystem of a business, which I would agree with 100%. Okay. Like, business users use their own stuff all the time. Now we can get into an argument of why are they using their own data sources instead of standard ones? Are they pulling from there? Are they then doing all of their own processes that are all manual? And there's huge opportunity within an organization to get rid of all of that manual work and automate it. and the BI team, especially with Power BI, can handle that, then I 100% agree. Yeah, that's one of the biggest power moves that Power BI has related to enhancing the productivity of people within an organization, right? So if that's a talent or raise awareness point that a BI team should engage in, because we have the tool sets that allow people to automate their manual processes, I'm 100% on board with that.
So I want to, you asked the question set there, and I want to kind of elaborate on that one a bit more. I think Power BI has given organizations permission to explore newer back-end systems to support their company. Where a number of patterns that I see is I see organizations start with, hey, we want to use Power BI. We start using Power BI. There are some small quick wins and or successes around it. Organizations typically look at Power BI going, oh, it's a cloud platform. I'm not sure we're going to love it. And this is maybe a bit earlier on in my experience with Power BI. Now it looks like there's much less hesitation to use Power BI at all because it just works well. It is at a much lower price point for organizations to get started. And the immediate wins that the business likes from Power BI, there's a really strong drive from the business side of the world to say we need to have Power BI. We have to do this. This is something we need in order for us to work and do our business. So what's happening is the business is demanding the tool. The tool is cloud-based, which is then easing that moment of time where the organization goes, okay, all right, Power BI works. It's secure. We haven't had any issues. We know what's going on. All right, let's adopt more cloud things. And I think to me, it feels like it gives permission to the organization to say, okay, let's rethink our data strategy to some degree. And so the value of Power BI being able to enable the business and the success they have, either with people just being more satisfied, they're able to do, to your point, Seth, more automation on their own. I think it's giving some opportunity to organizations to say, let's rethink our back-end ERP system. It was on-prem. We've had good success with Power BI. Let's try and move that to the cloud. And I'm seeing the same trend now, actually ramping up even faster around lake houses. So a lot of organizations had these monolithic warehouses on-prem. The volume of data is increasing. They're starting to run out of space and limit. And so instead of procuring more equipment to build the next bigger warehouse on-prem, I think this is also giving permission to say, okay, well, we like Power BI. What can we use to bolt on to Power BI the other things that I need to make Power BI more effective? And then this is the natural story of like, look, Power BI is investing in Fabric, Delta tables, lakehouse structures, Medallion type architectures. Let's focus on optimizing compute and not optimizing storage. Those are new conversations that I'm having, and more organizations they're becoming more accepting of that new thinking. And the speed by which we can now develop things, when we roll these out, I've got a customer on 5 years on Databricks and Medallion lake house architecture. And they're now deciding, again, they started with that. They did like a very small project. And now they're like, okay, let's kill our SQL server. We don't need that anymore. That's a waste of time. Hey, let's kill our analysis services that we had in Azure. We don't want that anymore, but we want to go all to Power BI. So they're actually seeing the consolidation of tools into one central area that says, we're finding so much more value by managing less of these infrastructure pieces, and we're going to get into the job of managing lake. So that's, to me, this was like this, the comment there from Mark. Yeah, we're at a moment right now where things are getting more pro-cloud, and we're seeing value from that. And even though there is potentially the same cost, and maybe in some certain situations, there's more cost to going cloud, it's the ease of management. It's the ease of being able to turn things on and just have it work that's providing a lot of value. Like, okay, this is a better way of thinking about not having to do this massive capital investment to buy new hardware. We're now going to make it more of an operational expense because now it's a service that we pay for. I don't know. That's what I feel like I'm seeing. Maybe I'm seeing things a bit tainted because that's the space I'm in.
I don't think so at all, right? But in terms of business value, right? Business intelligence teams are, and I think one of the things that gets me excited about, getting out of bed in the morning is we're uniquely the people who can go and, to Tommy's point, automate processes that are manual, work with individuals to centralize data sets, or figure out how, if you have to do something manual, you get the most out of it, right? Downstream. And it's that visibility into the source systems or the data that is applied with business logic that comes out of these domains that is the value for the business, because decisions start to be made off of that. And ironically, I guess the pitch would be the decisions of your organization without any sort of business intelligence activities whatsoever is completely fragmented, and those decisions are being made by people that are doing their own thing, probably on the same data sets, or different, or filtered, or like, so rather than everybody or a business unit working off the same data, right? Now you have like how many people working off their own thing, and that's where you get into this problem of like, differing numbers, things don't match up, who's making decisions, are we just kind of winging it because we don't really know? But that dovetails into, Mike, I think this kind of cycle of where we find ourselves as far as like how a BI team can engage with a business, because those quick wins are, hey, business, like to Tommy's, user point, I've got 4 different, manual processes and I compile all these numbers. So what is Power BI able to do? You come in, you connect all these sources, you automate, you pull the data together, you now have a model. And as the business intelligence person, you're either doing this on your own with the business, or better yet, you're engaging with the subject matter expert in the business unit that would allow you to like really like fine tune and figure out like where are all the data problems we have. Like, is this coming from a source system and we have data problems that we need to solve for? Who owns that? Right? Like, so as you're going through this almost miniature exercise to provide instant business value, and I think that's where Power BI wins, is we're automating something so you get visibility whenever you want to. And if you're doing it right, from the perspective of looking at Power BI is, and this solution is not the end state of how you would want to manage this data, there's a next phase most likely, which is I'm connecting all these sources. Do these sources, should they be part of a more enterprise state type thing?
Yes,
and
correct.
That's the point where automatically cloud-based solutions allow you to keep your foot on the pedal and just be like, okay, phase 1, business has their value. Phase 2, we're going to pursue because business is going to want more value out of the data sets that we've curated. And the next time they come around, rather than this being a 2-week project, it's going to be a 1-day project, right? And that's where the cloud-based solution, like there's no infrastructure costs, there's no planning 6 months ahead.
Well,
there's
it's
no
cost. There's no time to cure it.
From
sorry. Yes.
I don't own hardware. I don't have
no hardware
to pay somebody
costs.
to be
Yes,
there,
I agree with that.
Right? I don't need DR from a standpoint of like, now I need hardware here and hardware there, right?
Correct.
All of that is slow, as opposed to, we need to spool up this exercise and like pull this data together. Like, how many different solutions do we have now, including Fabric, which just makes it more easy for a business unit to go like from stage of, yay, we have automation. Now we have a centralized location for this stuff. Like, wow, that's crazy. Okay, let's think about this on a larger scale. And then ultimately, like, you're building the enterprise solution. And what happens? You end up back in Power BI, right? Like, now I'm going to scale that original report and I'm going to put it on the enterprise solution. That, so there's this like really unique way we're using the tool sets, and I think has strengthened the messaging that business intelligence teams have, because you're capable, right?
Yes.
You're dealing with the parts of the organization that are like, now I want it done now. And you're like, but on the other side, we're technical and we know things take time, right? So I can serve both of these masters, right? As long as I'm keeping all of that in mind and in focus.
You said the magic word though, and that's them allowing you to. And that's a big part of this. 100% to what you said. Yeah, we have this amazing ability to, in a sense, understand the business, but then translate that into what they're doing. It's like, how would this work if you actually really want to report on this? Part of that's, I call like looking under the rock. And if you looked at a lot of teams' processes and looked at how they're actually getting to a certain point, you'd be, it would be scary, because the amount of Excel tables or smart sheets and just dictate the process. We're going to let us help you. But again, if you have teams that are allowing you to, you're already there. But I think there's so many other things that, or other teams don't know, like, yeah, we can really expedite your process and really structure this so you're not asking those same questions every month, or you're not going through the same how do we get to this certain number. That, like, we can go in, but that requires teams saying, oh, I know BI can do this and I know they can help change our process. And I think that there's a lot of trust there that needs to occur. There's a lot of, in a sense, awareness too, where someone goes, hey, let's get BI involved, not just because we're at the end result and we want a number, but because they can help us now in changing our process a little here so we can get it in the right way.
Right. And I think that's where, when we talk about adoption strategy and things, why if and wherever possible, the highest up you can get buy-in, the better off you're going to be, because you're, and I don't want to involve this into it.
You got to have one. It won't go without it.
Because then directives are made, right?
Yes.
Like, we have an objective and the BI team is going to go solve that, right? They're going to engage with you.
I'm telling you,
you need to assist them in the objective. Like, because listen, we all know people within organizations love creating fiefdoms, right? And sometimes there are folks that are like, you're not touching my data.
Oh no.
Others are like, oh my gosh, you guys, like, yes, come in, help us out. Like, I need to produce this number and you guys are going to help me do that. Fantastic. I love you. Right. Like, so there's going to be a spectrum, and it's in those ones where people don't want to engage with for whatever reason. And there are plenty that you need, like, that executive push down of, like, we're going to solve these problems as an organization. Right. That's where that helps a lot.
So so many thoughts that are going on here. I feel like one of the moves here. So one core thought that keeps recurring in my mind, I've had this thought multiple times as you guys have been talking, is Power BI and what is going on with, Power Query, data engineering, the lakehouse architecture, Delta tables, like all these things that are kind of all coming together right now in this data space, which is very exciting for me because I'm really bought into this. Because I studied, half my master's in data science. And so I saw a lot of these things coming way before they were actually being widely adopted. And I was like, okay, I think I almost had some of those moments around Delta tables being like another aha moment for me. Like when I saw Power Query. Power Query was like, oh my gosh, this is going to fundamentally change how organizations do work in data purely from the business side. And I saw a very similar vision of, like, Delta tables is this other very similar thing that's like, wow, we've been wanting to build lakes of information and data, but it's so unwieldy to manage. Oh, now we have this great, SQL database-like table structure that makes it incredibly easy for us to manipulate and add data and at scale, which is incredibly amazing. But I think when I think about the Power BI space of things, focusing on just Power BI, it has really commoditized cloud. And it has commoditized the ability to engineer data, albeit at smaller volumes. Because, we all agree Power Query can only do so much and it starts falling over at some point if you build things inefficiently. But those two factors has made the ability to collect, manage, make cubes. And again, if I'm talking IT terms, right? The cube making process used to be only held by a few people in a very expensive machine that only a couple people could do. Power BI came in and said, hey, you can now all make cubes for free. You get a cube and you get a cube and you get a cube. Like, they're everywhere. And so we don't even talk about them as if they are data cubes anymore. We're now just looking at them as a data model. So we've even changed the terminology around what a cube is being built in. And now we see with Fabric is now we're seeing this blurring of the line between SQL and the lake and now the cube. Like, it's kind of all one object now, which is amazing. Love it. Think this is the right move. But because everything has been commoditized, I think we're finding now in organizations, an organization doesn't need to have as large of a team in data anymore to do the things at scale that they need to do. I almost feel like, and I was actually working with a client a long time ago that was talking about, he would tell me, I don't need a lot of people on my team. There's a lot of people on the team that need to keep things running and moving the way they are. I need 2 or 3, he called them like ninjas. Experts
or unicorns.
He said, I just need 2 or 3 unicorns, and those people we give them the hardest project we can find. We don't have them working on simple or easy things. We give them the most difficult challenge in our organization to solve, because once you solve that most difficult thing, everything else starts falling in place, because everything else takes less time, it's less hard, it's not as challenging. So to your point, Seth, I'm going to go back to wrap this all together now, right? So that was another thought I had. And then, Seth, you're talking about adoption strategy. One thing I'll say is, if you do not read or study the adoption roadmap, you better stink and go do it, because the adoption roadmap on Microsoft's blog, written by Melissa Coates, is phenomenal. It works really, really well. And I've used it with many organizations and consulted with them. And literally people are like, I don't have an executive sponsor. We don't have a really good direction here. And they follow that thing to a T. And they go into leadership and say, here's what I built. Look, I've got a community practice. Look, we're going to form this thing called Center of Excellence. Look, we've got these policies around things we're going to do or not do with data. And the organization doesn't even know they're missing this stuff. They don't even have a clue that this is needed. And what happens is, in more often times than not, the people that learn and study how to provide guardrails for deployment and governance on your organization, they immediately get success right from the organization. You deliver quick wins. Yeah. Leadership loves it. And you get, all of us, I think, would say, all of our careers have been built on, at some level, doing the adoption roadmap, and it has opened more doors for us by doing those things. It's like,
it's because you're keeping strategy in mind, right?
Yeah.
Like how you're implementing things now is a stepping stone for a vision that you have, right? And that's what you continually need to do. It's the same thing as an OKR objective, right? It's not something you're going to be able to crank out in a week. The overall objective has a lot of key results that have to line up and get you down the road.
100%.
That's a well thought out thing. And I think many, many people all throughout levels are executors only, right?
Yeah.
Objective. Yep.
That's a really good point.
Execute. And every day you have to, at least on a weekly basis, be like, am I on track? Am I on track? And I think, like, the point I like to make in here, Tim, Mike, that I agree with.
I'm Tim. Thank you.
For now on.
Tim.
For now on, please refer to me as Tim.
Is to dovetail on what you're saying. I think the strongest BI teams do reports. They shouldn't do all reports. Right?
Yes.
My goal engaging with business units is not to take over their reporting.
No. We want to enable them.
To support them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I agree. From a ninja's perspective,
yes,
right? You absolutely have the people who are just cranking like key reports, right? Or customer-facing report, or things that are leveraging enterprise systems. There's a component to that. But there's also members of the team that are deeply engaging with those business units and guiding them and building their skill sets up as you go along. And I think, like, there's one other point I wanted to touch on related to, like, the ecosystem of Fabric and these teams and how you build up business intelligence within an organization. The reason, like, Power BI is part of that, and Fabric kind of shakes this up a little bit because it kind of jumps directly into building the infrastructure, right? An enterprise infrastructure that can scale. And the reason you want to do that is because it gives you a launching point to combine data sets and introduce other types of data professionals related to the heavy analysts, the data scientists, where you start to do advanced analytics, right? Because you can't get into predictive, prescriptive, all the fancy machine learning models, all of that kind of stuff without a base of data that you've already ensured has the appropriate business logic and is quality before you start throwing data sets at these sorts of folks. Because you want a hot mess. That's one where it's like, oh, we're gonna pull it out of an Excel spreadsheet. We're gonna, like, create models of, like, no, man, it's not how it happens, right? You level up, but the business intelligence team, data engineering, like, all of that is part of this kind of ecosystem of there's a starting point, and your progression as your progression of your data decision making and culture are a direct result of this team engaging with the business and leading it towards that charge of comprehensively putting value behind the data that is in this ecosystem.
Yes. Mark said something in the chat here that I think is very relevant here, and this is how I've observed it, and I would imagine you guys are both all seeing the same thing, right? We all started by building, expert, awesome reports, right? We start there. We snag some data. It's maybe one source. It's not a lot of things. We start building some reports. We start finding some value. And now we start finding ourselves going, well, we need more data. We got to engineer more things. So this is a natural sales progression that I see as a consultant. This is all the time this is occurring. And then what happens is the question comes from there is, well, we need more data. But it would be, these reports would be more impactful if I grab this extra source, or if we
have a subset.
Right. Exactly.
Pull in all the rest of this. Yeah.
Pull all the rest of it in. And so now your strategy moves from, okay, we've made some quick wins with reports. We've got some Power BI stuff up and running. People are starting to get comfortable with it. Okay, now we're really moving the needle, and we're saying we're now building back-end stuff. Now you need to educate on what is a lake house? What is a medallion architecture? And like one thing that I think has been very interesting here, initially when Microsoft landed on this whole lake house experience, they were not initially talking medallion architectures. They kind of started saying like raw, transformed, and like curated. They kind of had their own terms for what that was doing. But I think now they've actually, in more of their recent language, it sounds like they're just adopting it because it's resonating with people. There's this, the bronze layer, which would be your equivalent to your raw data. You have your silver layer where you groom and transform and filter and clean. That's the quality portion of your data that you enhance. Yeah. And then the gold layer is, okay, this is my service layer. This is the layer that I give to other people, either in it services directly data sets, or it services, hey team, I'm going to expose these gold tables to you directly. There, in that area, you can now directly interact with those tables and build on top of those read-only tables. This is really impactful, I think. Anyways, I think, Mark, you had a great point. I just say I resonate with that. And I think all of us would also say that's a very common pattern that we see with organizations. We start with reports and we go deeper in the end.
Well, I think in order for us to get there with organizations, we need to go from less being reactive to requests for reports. And I always think about how we become more proactive, because what I think BI teams can fall into the trap of, we start building reports. Great. Now you're my report builder. That's going to be your role. But one thing that I found to be almost like a magic cure to getting BI to be more front and center, and I call it the $1 million meeting. And it's basically the BI team representing on a quarterly basis, meeting with departments and basically just saying, if you had $1 million, what would you have? Rather than, oh, we just need this report now, so we're going to meet you whenever we need this report. It's like, well, what are your problems right now? Like almost having these calls so those items come up, and it's more than just reports. All of a sudden people are going, what would be great? Like we have all these systems right now. We'd love to get this to you. It's like, oh, well, we actually have we can do something here. We can actually pull this in and engineer it for you. Really? Yeah. So let's bring us in and we'll have that conversation. Oh, we'd really love alerting. It's like,
I struggle with your comments.
Yeah. Why?
I struggle with them on one side. On one end, to your point, I get it. I still feel like, and maybe this is just me interpreting how you're saying things, Tommy. Like on one end, I feel like you're saying, bring it to the BI team. We'll figure it out and we'll get you back a report. I don't like doing that. Like I feel like I'm more, and maybe this is just the way I'm interpreting your comment there, which I could be a little off base here, but I feel like what I would like to do is to enable or push people to like, how can we more, let me just say it this way. I've had some recent interactions with some companies where they've done a really good job of, getting the message out there about what they're doing with Power BI. They're releasing it to the organization. They're giving some more capability. And in doing that, what is happening is the teams are coming back and saying, hey, look, you've spent all this time to make this central model. It meets some of our needs, and we're happy that we can now get access to the data and make our own tables. But I have this specific need, and the questions are being articulated in a much different way now. And now that we have context to this main data set, we're able to now address these issues that are more nuanced, right? We have this central data model. We now understand more of what this special use case is. But what I'm finding is it's very helpful to have, like, we, as the central team or even the COE, we are more around policy, governance, education, data culture. Yes, we build some reports. Yes, we handle a couple main key data sets, but our whole goal is not to build more reports. It's more to interact with that team member or teams themselves and say, okay, here's what we built. This is what we're standing behind. We'll explain what we did. Here you go. Business comes in and says, I'll use it. And then it's like, I need it's different. Does that make sense?
Hang on to your seat. Hang on to your seat. I'm going to agree with Tommy and say he was on that path, man. Like,
okay. All right. Sorry. I'm just misinterpreting then. Okay.
Was proactively engaging with the business to solve the business problems, not being a report generation mill.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Good.
As long as that point
that I'm with you.
With me extremely, and to all the listeners who are in a team that is just pouring out reports, that's a dangerous spot to be.
Absolutely.
Because if you're the team that's doing all of it, you have to be very cautious about being the easy button for lazy people.
1,000%.
That's a good point.
Yeah, everybody's everybody's fire is your fire now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is where, as a team, having a workflow, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. Like, how do you have a workflow, like whether it's Jira, DevOps, like whatever the case may be, where you're managing how those work items come in, you're managing expectations and forcing other people to understand how a process works. It's the only way you can guardrail against the flood of requests.
Yes.
At the same time, it also gives you visibility to say, like, oh my gosh, like all of a sudden this month we have like 50 requests for the same report, and the only difference is like this thing. Let's just create one report.
Centralize it.
Right.
All of it.
Go access
fix it yourself.
Like, that's part of why you build and manage that framework, because to Tommy's point, like, you don't want to be the report mill, and you fail as a business intelligence team if you're not doing things like Tommy's $1 million meeting, where you're engaging with the business proactively to solve the big problems, because otherwise it does become the lowest, the volume of requests are typically the information workers in business units, and they shouldn't be driving what you're doing, right? You should be engaging with the managers and leaders of the business units to make sure that your team can produce something that's reusable for their org, and guiding that, really, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%, Tommy.
I am floored and humbled. But no, so let me. I know we're at the end, but I'll quickly kind of break down the agenda of that meeting, so I think that'll be a big help. Our meeting is try to meet with a subset of the team. If you have a large sales team, Northeast region, first 20 minutes, kind of going over bugs, things that maybe are broken, just to see like where they're at, what are they liking, what are they not, and then the rest. Again, it's communicated. It's not what requests do you have. It's going through what initiatives does the sales team have? What would be nice for them to have? And we always phrase it: if you had $1 million and 1,000 people working for you, what would that have? What those meetings occur, to Seth's point, is the big ideas, the initiatives, rather than they just thinking, just build this report for this one system. To go, we are actively doing this and not even thinking of reports. You will find, as being that unicorn, that ninja, oh, well, we can actually do this really easily. Oh, this actually goes into something else we're talking about. And those conversations allow the other departments to see kind of that advisory, that role of where that plays in a bigger picture. But then the other side of it too, where it's not necessarily going to output just to report. It may output, let's actually help you in that process to get there.
This is awesome. And in the chat here, Donald's talking about like this, the data sensei, something. And then this brings to mind what James Bartlett has done at his organization, which is talking about the data dojo. And I put his links for his 2 blogs, which I think are highly very good reads. He's thinking a lot about it. He's a great thinker on like how this is working. And I really like James' approaches of like the dojo. Like, we're a community of people, we're getting together, we're sharpening some skills, and he gives some great feedback, right? Here's what our first workshop looked like. Here's what our second workshop looked like. Oh, by the way, here's some things that we missed, right? He does a great job of saying, like, as you're building this data culture, we're talking about here, mistake number 1, failing to keep a consistent schedule, failing to keep the conversation going on Teams or something else. Let's engage that conversation. Let's get people excited about it and getting engaged there. And then a mistake number 3, letting perfect be the enemy of good. And I
iterate.
Like, a lot of times I've got people all over that I work with. I'm like, look, just get it out the door. We just need something good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, because it will never be 100% perfect and you'll never get it out the door. So let's just get something out the door something is better than nothing, and we can always come back and fix it and refine and find out where the edge cases lie and refine those and make them better.
It's also where change management helps too, because
true statement.
Because you may not be the perfect one. It may be somebody else who doesn't know and sees the art of the possible with your report.
Oh, here we go.
And it's like, oh, now I need this. Now I need that. And it's like, no,
you don't.
Now you go back to the end of the queue, right?
Yep.
And I'll come back. You compile all of the things you want me to add.
Yes.
And we'll add that in a second.
Hey, great pull out there. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much for joining in and talking and communicating around the stuff. This is great. A lot of good ideas coming from chat. So I thank you for enhancing and talking about the conversation with us. We really appreciate your ears. And we know this is a big commitment of time. 2 hours a week, every week. For the last 2 years, you've been, well, not everyone, but some people have been joining us. So we do appreciate you coming back over and over again. If these topics are helping you out, if these topics are encouraging you to think about these things and think about process, we really, please help us get this out, this message out there to more people. We just love doing it. We love talking about it. We love this community. It's exciting. So share it on social media. If you're in the office and talking to people, just say, hey, this is a great podcast. This is cool. You should listen to it. Check it out. You'll find some value. And I hope this, if anything, I hope the principles and the things that we're giving you is making you more money. You're getting new opportunities in your job. Like hopefully it's going to refine things. So we really appreciate you. Please share it out and let someone else know that this is some good stuff as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, helps us out a ton. If you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about you want us to do on a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast and you can leave us a question or topic or an idea. Finally, if you want to join us live, you can do so every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Excellent. I always feel like, Tommy, when you say like you should, if you like what you hear, if you like what's going on here, tough luck. You should just, if you want to give us some feedback, sorry, you got to show up live.
It was like butter, Tommy.
I know it was good.
That was nice.
I've actually written it down now, so it's
awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.